Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Following an impassioned plea by the Xitsonga community about a misspelling on the new banknotes and coins, the PANSALB African Language Board has moved to now correct the error. On the new banknotes and coins, the Xitsonga wording read Banginkulu Ya Afrika-Dzonga instead of Banginkulu Ya Afrika-Dzonga, if you may have heard the difference there. The biggest mistake by the South African Reserve Bank was dropping the letter N. Let's now get more clarity on this. We're joined by Xitsonga language expert Professor Nxalati Golele. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time, Professor. A lot of tongues wagging around whether the N should be there or not. What's your take on PAN South Africa's Language Board's explanation, their initial explanation about what the translation appearing on the banknotes?
Ma'am, this is a purely linguistic matter. And the correct form is the one without the N. We need to emphasize that. The correct form is the one without the N. The N in this case was a mistake that we lived with for decades without being conscious of it. And I'll explain why. In Xitsonga, nouns are categorized into classes. There are 18 classes in all. And each class is characterized by a class prefix. So the two terms under discussion now belong to different classes. Bangi belongs to class 9. Its prefix is latent, it would be ye. And in the plural, the prefix will be ti, the bank. On the other hand, you have class 1 of the nouns, which is characterized by the prefix mu, mu. Now, when the prefixes are used with the adjectival stem, kulu. In the case of class 1, there is influence on the sounds that follow each other.
Yes.
That is how we come to have the N with nouns of class 1. The process is as follows. The prefix of class 1 is mu, mu. And in this case, the adjectival stem begins with a K, kulu. Now, when the two combine, the U of the prefix falls off. And the M now joins with the K. Now the K and the M influence each other in such a way that the K now assumes the nasal characteristic of the M, and the M assumes the glottal characteristic of the K, and they produce nk. That is how the process works. So for class 1, you will have the nk because of the M and the K combining to produce a new sound, the nk. So with class 1, you will have, for instance, mununkulu. You will have the nk. But with class 9, where Bangi falls, you do not have that process. It will be Bangi and joins with the adjectival stem kulu and becomes Bangikulu. There's no influence of any nasal sound there.
Professor,
so
the one argument, if you'll allow me to interrupt you there, that's really formulated around this discussion is what happens in many African languages, the very thin line between describing humans and non-humans, and that in African cosmology there is no it versus human, which has also led to this discussion expanding even further?
As I said from the beginning, this is a purely linguistic issue.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do with cosmology. There's nothing to do with dialects. It has nothing to do with anything. It's simply language. It's simply speech sounds influencing each other when they follow each other or when they are in close proximity. It has nothing to do with cosmology or anything else. It's simply linguistics, as I was explaining to you. It's speech sounds influencing each other when they are in close proximity. That is all. And as I was saying, in class 1, the M influences the K, and the K influences the M, and they produce a new sound, NK. There's no cosmology there. There's no culture there. There's nothing. It's purely linguistics. And I urge that we focus on that. It is a linguistic process. We must not, it has nothing to do with whether it's human or cosmology. It's purely linguistic.
So,
and these are things you have to be taught at school. You have to study at university. It has nothing to do with any other thing. It's purely linguistic.
So had this error not been noted, because it seems to have gone by for quite a while without anybody saying anything about it, what do you think could have been the perhaps the consequence in the long term when it comes to really understanding the Xitsonga language?
You see, with all languages, you have corrections somewhere. If you look at dictionaries or other books, you will find statements like enlarged and corrected, corrected and enlarged. So these processes are there all the time, where you do research, where you do investigations, and find that you were making a mistake somewhere, you correct it. It happens all the time.
Would you say that this was a common mistake, that it's something that could have easily been, mistaken in the process of putting the words on the notes?
No, there's no problem with the current issue, as I say. Bangikulu without the N is correct because it belongs to a different class of nouns. Nkulu, the N, functions with nouns of class 1. That is why I'm saying it's a purely linguistic issue. So if you don't understand those processes of linguistics, then we have this confusion. The problem arose because of analogy. Because in the other classes, you remember I said we have 18 categories of noun classes.
Yes.
In the other classes, you use there's no N. If you say shikolo for school, shikolo, shikulu, there's no N. But with class 1, you have the. So I think the problem that arose is that over the years, as we're using this, we're not conscious of the fact that there are classes where you don't use the N. There are classes that use it. There is a class that uses the N. It was a matter of not being conscious of that fact. Because certain classes don't have the N, it just swept through.
Some arguments, as we try and explore what the difference between the two words are, some have said that Banginkulu is a compound noun which is formed by the two words, and the noun being Bangi and the adjective stemming from Kulu to form Banginkulu, and then that the N cannot be accounted for as to where it was coming from.
It was a mistake, as I say.
Yeah.
It was an analogy from the other classes. So these things were lumped together. The classes of the nouns of class 1 and the rest of the classes, this other 70, They were trapped together by mistake. That was the error that was existing. Now, on closer scrutiny, then it was realized that there is a difference among these classes.
What do you think we can learn from this experience, Professor?
From the experience, we learned that there are errors in language as in any other spheres. And once you discover the mistake, you correct. That is what you must learn.
Yeah.
How many times do we correct? Don't we correct? You discover and correct. Even with the orthography, at the moment, there are certain sounds which didn't have symbols. Now these symbols are being added. So language is a process. It's a process. There's no time where you can say now we have everything in order.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
What we learn is that when you discover a mistake, you correct it.
Very well, Professor. Nxalati Golele, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for breaking it down and explaining to us there, Xitsonga language expert, giving us a sense of how the error was made and resulting in a correction.